I think this whole, like, what I'm going to describe as this one weird trick will change your life and doctors hate it. This whole
Yeah,
paradigm, no, I'm not for it.
yeah. Yeah, I think, yeah, broadly, I agree. Is like, yeah, it's easy for people who want the world to change in a certain way when they see these things promising big results for small changes. We want to believe them because it's like this could really help animals or really improve the world. But sadly, I think the reality is often this is highly overstated.
And of course, for defaults in particular, they're promising because they're a way of bypassing a difficult conversation. My point of view is that, like, I'm sorry that conversation is difficult. We still got to have it.
Today, I spoke with Seth Ariel Green, who is a research scientist at the Humane and Sustainable Food Lab at Stanford University. He recently published a meta-analysis, which is functionally a review or a summary of many different academic papers on the topic, which was called Meaningfully Reducing Consumption of Meat and Animal Products is an Unsolved Problem, where he and his colleagues reviewed over 30 papers and over 100 different interventions on the topic of meat reduction. Seth also writes about the science of meat reduction on a Substack called Regression to the Meat, which is actually maybe my favorite Substack game of all time. And I highly recommend checking it out for some accessible and very fun to read writing about meat reduction. And today, Seth and I spoke about why he's a bit more pessimistic than most about plant-based defaults, what actually works when it comes to changing people's food choices and diets, why some research in this space can be quite misleading, and possible new interventions to shape diets and food choices that he's excited about researching. He's also sorry if his meta-analysis paper is a bit of a downer, but hopefully this conversation also shows some reasons to be hopeful too. And I learned a lot in this episode, so I hope you do too. Hey Seth, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks, James. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. Good. We like to start everyone off with the same question, which is, what's something you changed your mind on recently related to the animal advocacy movement, and why?
I'm going to talk about something that I'm thinking about, although I'm not sure I've changed my mind yet. Yeah, basically, if you talk to some people in the movement, they're going to say, don't worry about culture. Don't worry about beliefs. Worry about technology. Anything we can do to accelerate the growth of plant-based proteins and like true analogs is where we should be focusing our efforts. Sometimes I feel this way. And then recently I read an interview with Wayne Seong in the New Yorker about his own journey to a seminary school. And I thought he made some really interesting points about the role that religion plays in like providing infrastructure and broader meaning to a movement. And in particular, thinking about our own movement in light of other successful movements and unsuccessful movements. I have been mulling over this question about whether I should be worried about culture or not, broadly speaking. What do you think?
Well, it's a big question. So your reflection is more, I guess this is come in many forms. It's maybe the simplistic version was, if we just change institutions or develop technologies that are cheap, tasty, healthy plant-based foods, and everyone will just switch en masse. But then,
Yeah.
I guess it's Wayne's point, and I guess your reflection, this stuff is necessary but not sufficient, and we need to do a bunch of work to change people's attitudes to help adoption.
Well, it's
And
funny because
other.
that could be one possible read of it, but another is that it's just kind of a cop out to be hoping for some technological thing. We should actually be
Yes,
like doing the hard
yes,
work in the meantime. And do we think that adoption of this stuff, even if it does get Deus Ex Machina into our lives, is going to be instantaneous? I don't think so. Like if we look at,
yes.
backlash in Texas and Florida and stuff, should we be thinking in advance about how can we make this amenable to people? So there could be like some intermediate answers here. But I think broadly, lately, my answer is that I've been thinking more about culture and less about technology.
Interesting. Well, we'll dive into all that, and maybe as some context for listeners, I guess the backlash you're referring to is the cultivated meat bans happening in, I think now 7
Yeah.
US states. And yeah, I guess this is very timely for me because I'm currently in the Bay Area in San Francisco, where there's technology optimism is, widespread and running amok. And already there's been a few conversations that sounds something like, we're just going to have artificial intelligence explosion leading to cultivated meat being extremely cheap, ... end of all animal suffering. And I agree
Yeah.
with you that there's a slightly simplistic narrative, and there's other things that have to be done, including what Wayne and you talk about in terms of.
That's actually not that simplistic, though. When Dwarkesh Patel interviewed Lewis Ballard, his very first
Yeah.
question is, okay, so what are we doing? If we're going to invent perfect substitutes in 10 years, what are we doing in the meantime? And it's like, wow, man, there's a lot of assumptions built into that.
Yeah.
I don't even know where to begin evaluating them.
Yeah, exactly. But that's probably not going to be the bulk of the
Okay.
discussion today. I guess
Yeah.
today we're going to be talking about your work at Stanford at the Humane and Sustainable Food Lab and all the interesting work I guess you've been doing there, and maybe more broadly in terms of analyzing the literature and creating new research on to what extent people actually change their diets towards more plant-based foods and less animal-based foods. And I think the first thing I think we can talk about there is defaults. So maybe do you want to, in a nutshell, explain what a default is and the research you've done in the space and what you guys have found?
Yeah. So first, I want to start with something that you just said, which is we were talking about changing diets. I'm going to come back to this exact phrase a lot. Something that Jennifer Chen at the Better Food Foundation said, we're distinguishing changing diets from changing a single meal.
Interesting.
Okay, so a
Yeah.
default is a setup to some choice you're making. Let's say it's a meal where one option is more or less pre-selected for you. So if you don't make any active choices or do anything, that's the option you get. Simple example is go to Chipotle, you're filling out Chipotle's online ordering, you're filling out what you want in your taco, tofu or something is pre-selected for you. So if you just skip that question, you get tofu. That's a very minimal type of default. You could have it be more extreme. For instance, you might have a long message that says, Chipotle is proud to serve you tofu, a healthy and sustainable blah, blah, blah. And if you don't want tofu, please write a 3-paragraph essay about why you would like another thing. That's on the other end. You can make your defaults as onerous as possible. But the basic idea is it's a way of setting up the choice so that if you're not paying attention, you just go ahead, you just choose a thing. And it's meant to be cheap, easy to scale, and it can theoretically operate without coming to your conscious awareness. I have not conducted any default studies myself, although I am working on one now with some folks at Greener by Default and another researcher at a different school. I'm really excited about that. But the context here is that a lot of people in the animal welfare movement are very excited about defaults as a behavioral change strategy. I'm less excited than they are. And the reason is that last year I wrote a meta-analysis of all interventions that intended to reduce consumption of meat and animal products. This kind of gets into what I do, what we do at our lab. And this meta-analysis looked only at studies that met certain, in my opinion, low, but actually in practice quite stringent quality bars. And those are, it had to have at least 25 subjects in treatment and control. So you have to have 50 people or more.
Yeah.
It had to be a randomized control trial, no quasi-experimental stuff. And back to your point about changes in diet versus changes in meals, it had to measure meat consumption at least a single day after the treatment was administered to people. So that a good example is if you had done a default study and it was the conference is offering tofu, and then you could either choose tofu or not, and then that's the entire outcome measurement, we wouldn't have included that because that tells you about changing a meal. We would have included it if it said, oh, by the way, what'd you eat for dinner the next day? Or something like that. Anything in the category of do changes last. And when we did this, we found that every single default study published by December 2023 didn't actually qualify.
Wow.
So so it's kind of a
kind of damning beginning already.
Yeah, this is tough. This is tough stuff. I didn't really know that everybody loved defaults in advance of starting this literature. I kind of just waded into it blind. But I think this result surprises people. But the basic problem, the most fundamental problem, is this exact thing. Just that most of these studies just do their one and done. They put the default in, and that's the end of the story.
Can you explain why that doesn't work? Because, in a way, I don't expect a default, let's say on Monday, to affect their diet on Friday, but I do expect that the default happens every day of the week. It has a similar impact every day of the week. So, does it actually matter that's not measuring diet change, change in meals 5 days away or 6 months away?
And complex question you're asking, because ultimately that is a way of saying, what do you believe is happening outside of the scope of the study? And then the reader's beliefs about I don't think it's affecting you 5 days later, and then I'll make that additional assumption. but that's not actually in the data itself. So that's like actually a hard question. The data do not speak for themselves. What do we think they mean? Always, that's a hard question. To your point about what if the default is 5 days a week, that's interesting. And this is the idea. This is, I think, the promise of defaults, that you can just, if they work 1 day a week, then you can just scale them up to 5. Do we really think that's the same thing, though? Like, it's much more plausible to me that if you get a default once a week, you don't even notice it. You just say, okay, I got tofu today. But if like every single day you start noticing that your lunch does not have meat, or that you have to make a choice to get meat, I think you're a lot more likely to say, okay, I need to like make a decision on this menu. So I do not think that the scaled up version of the default that we have in our mind really is the same thing, because the more present it becomes to people, I think the more likely you are to have a backlash. Because then it stops being like, oh, this one conference didn't want me to have meat. It starts being like, oh man, my school has like an agenda against meat. And that's where students start complaining. And that's where dining halls start getting mad.
Yeah. This sounds kind of similar to, I guess, a conversation. But Katie Cantrell from Green by Default also came on the
Yeah.
podcast maybe some months ago. And yeah, she said that there's almost this tension where the more, let's say, strong or obvious the defaults, the more powerful it is in terms of reducing consumption, but also the more likely it is people will almost rebel against it and find ways to get around it. So it's actually quite a fine line. And so I guess your point is kind of saying, sure, it works 1 day a week because it's so small and not noticeable. But when you do it 5 days, people start thinking, maybe I should just go to a different place to buy food, or maybe I know that if I ask twice, I can get the meal I actually want. And people start utilizing those other options. Is that right?
Yes, that's exactly right. And this goes to I got a lot of things that I think about defaults, but the only one that I think that's important is basically goes back to your earlier point, James, about, okay, well, we have to look at this little data and make a model of the world, and that's how we interpret what we see. My model of the world just does not include a lot of big effects from small changes in general, like in regards to food, in regards to, whether having a small loan, if you're a person like a subsistence farmer, does getting a small loan change your life? Like, it looked like that for some pilot studies, and then it doesn't look like that once you scale that up. When we talk about defaults, the more exactly what Katie said. And I want to stop here and say that, like, I'm kind of, establishing myself, I guess, as a critic of defaults, but the people doing this work at GBD and other organizations, they're smart. They've thought about this and they've seen it for themselves. Like, I know that they're thinking about this question. So I'm actually not sure there is that much daylight between us. I think I'm going to be candid here. I'm not in a position where I'm fundraising on behalf of a defaults centric organization. So I can just say this. I actually don't really know how much daylight there is between us. But my basic thought is that the more you default people in towards eating plant-based, the more it starts to look like Meatless Monday. And we know that people don't like that.
Yeah. Interesting. And yeah, I think this is something you alluded to before, which is part of it is there's almost a mindset question, which is some people start out as inherently relatively skeptical and thinking most things don't change people or their behavior, their diets by huge amounts. So we should assume most things are going to be quite small. And some people are maybe naturally more optimistic. And I think Lewis, in podcast we had with him, said, his default for most interventions is they don't work. And when they work, this is a pleasant surprise. But I think for most people, this is not the case. But it seems like you're more in the case of things don't really work until proven otherwise, or you expect things to be small changes just because it's hard to change the world.
Yeah. And if we really want to get spicy with this, I would say that a lot of the research in food in particular that shows that small changes can have big effects is almost certainly fraudulent.
Well, that is a bold claim. Do you want to say more about that?
Yeah. There's if you look at a lot of these papers, they all say, and diners go through their lives and make like 215 unconscious choices a day or something like that. And the site is always Wansink and Sobel 2007. This is a book called like Mindless Eating. And the lead author of it, Brian Wansink, was uncordially dismissed from his position at Cornell because of what we now call p-hacking, which is a way of like slicing the data a million ways until you get what you are looking for. I think cherry picking is the right way to think about this. So when I look at this stuff, I see like, okay, not only is like the whole, like the foundational text that everyone is still citing one of its co-authors is now, in my opinion, fairly disgraced, or at least not welcome in the academic community anymore. It is a red flag for me that people are still citing this as the foundational text of like why mindless eating is such a powerful determinant of our behavior. I feel kind of sad when I think about that.
Yeah, yeah. There's actually there's some other academics that had similar fates, right? That have done a bunch of these stuff on nudges. Is that right? I think I'm thinking of
Yeah, probably Francesca
Gina.
Gino.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Some people have said this about Dan Ariely, although he retains his position. And if you're listening to this, Dan, I'm sorry if you didn't do anything. I think this whole, like, what I'm going to describe as this one weird trick will change your life and doctors hate it. This whole
Yeah,
paradigm, no, I'm not for it.
yeah. Yeah, I think, yeah, broadly, I agree. Is like, yeah, it's easy for people who want the world to change in a certain way when they see these things promising big results for small changes. We want to believe them because it's like this could really help animals or really improve the world. But sadly, I think the reality is often this is highly overstated.
And of course, for defaults in particular, they're promising because they're a way of bypassing a difficult conversation. My point of view is that, like, I'm sorry that conversation is difficult. We still got to have it.
Hmm. And maybe sticking on defaults for a little bit. So we kind of alluded to a couple of problems, which is, well, the quality of the research isn't particularly good, so it's hard to have a really rigorous idea of what that effects are. And there's related things, which is maybe people that their behavior changes after the default gets introduced. So this rather is when the equilibrium is actually much less powerful in changing their food choices compared to the first day. I guess what are the problems do you expect that to be? And like, I guess I had a question on like the leakage problem. One is
Yeah.
when leakage being, people just go somewhere else. I can imagine in university dining halls, this is a problem because let's say there's 5 dining halls they can go from. Only one's doing this default strategy, so they can just go somewhere else, or they can ask a couple of times. But then there's other cases where, I think in New York, a bunch of hospitals do this kind of double default. There, I think it's not so easy. For better or for worse, the patient can't go anywhere, right? They're kind of stuck there. So I can imagine leakage there isn't as much of a problem. Like, do you broadly agree? Do you think it's like relatively context specific how this stuff works?
Absolutely. I think context specific is this like perennially underrated explanation. And also, I would say hospitals are a great place for default. I expect that to scale up pretty well because I think that's a way to catch someone at a point where they're having a moment of reflection about their life and their lifestyle. That's a great place to say, like, maybe you want to have some tofu. Maybe this is a good, like, a day to start eating tofu. And also, I think NYC hospitals have put a lot of work into making the plant-based options delicious. Like, there's some real nice stuff from, gosh, Michael Grunwald has an article about this in Canary Media from last year, or 2024 rather, in which people say like, "Oh, it's pretty good," and that's a positive update, right? So and whether the food is good or not matters a lot.
Yeah,
I guess I'm less when I've like actually worked with universities and restaurants and stuff and done a little bit of this, looking at this work. I'm not so sure that they make the plant-based food good. I think
mm,
they make it in many cases for the vegans. So everything else gets a lot of attention and the plant-based option is kind of an afterthought. So if you default people into that and you cause them to have a negative update about the quality of plant-based food, well, that's not good.
yeah,
So I don't really know how this is going to work. I know that the NYC hospital seems to have done a really good job with it.
yeah. I agree. I think it's always tough when interventions ultimately are out of the control of people who don't want them to happen, and then it's hard to make sure the quality is up to our bar at least.
That's what it means to scale up. It means that someone else who doesn't care the way you care is actually in charge now.
Yeah, that's tough. And it's like, to have interventions that are kind of where the quality is kind of hard to get wrong, where it's going to be so standardizable. Yeah, it feels like there aren't that many things that meet that bar, right?
Yeah. One would be have everybody watch 10 minutes of Dominion. That's
Yeah,
I mean, if we can make that happen, it's a really, it's hard, obviously, but that's really standardized. So this is like a different way to approach the whole question of persuasion.
yeah, makes sense. Some of the points you had on defaults were some of the studies, they also ignore what animal or what meat is eaten. Can you talk more about how that might
Yeah.
actually influence the final results of these studies?
Specifically, with the interspecies substitution question, there often is just not a lot of good data on that question. Probably the best paper on defaults to date is by Joel Ginn and Greg Sparkman, 2024, which is like a thing called like, can we default to vegan or something like that?
Right. And just for reference, we'll link all these below. I'm sure
Yeah.
you'll reference a bunch of studies. People can find these in the show notes below.
Yeah, I think I got the title wrong, but whatever. It's by Ginn and
People find
Sparkman.
it.
Yeah. They do defaults at a station at 3 separate universities. So already great intervention. Got a lot of different things happening, but I love this multi-site thing. At one of those schools at RPI, the staff did not play ball. They said like, they said to the students like, there's meat, don't worry. Like this, like researchers like watched these interactions happen. So
Wow.
now we're only looking at 2 schools because the third one, they just basically said like, sorry, it didn't work. Although that's interesting too, because that's a way of saying defaults where they work is a different question than how effective are defaults.
Yeah. Then you also maybe you should assume like 2 out of 3 will also have this problem, and then that reduces everything. But yeah, I think
exactly
that is a very important consideration.
It's just a hard problem. It's hard to get people to do stuff. Anyway, so at the schools where it actually worked, which were Tulane and Lehigh, they have a station where you have a plant-based option by default, and the meat basically is hidden so that you can like request it, but if you don't request it, you get like the plant-based option.
Yeah.
They notice a lot of leakage. On days where this happens, many people go to other stations, and we don't know what they did there. So you have to make some assumptions about how much meat they ate, but we know that like they didn't eat the plant-based thing at this station, but did they go away and eat twice as many burgers as they would have because they were annoyed? I mean, probably not, but that could be pretty bad. Or maybe these are like the most hardcore carnivores, so they're the most likely to, in fact, make sure that they get meat. So like there's no actual change in that population. Or the problem is we don't really know enough about, in this particular study, or really any of these studies, about what the alternatives are in the plant-based station. If it's like plant-based meatballs versus like a quarter pound of meat-based meatballs, and someone doesn't like that, they doesn't like the way it's presented, so they go somewhere else and they have like, double cheeseburger with bacon, maybe that's twice as much meat. I don't know.
Yeah.
And we don't know anything about like the interspecies stuff in those contexts.
Yeah, because it's always, I guess there's almost 2 questions, like that they look at meals rather than
Exactly.
actually quantity of meat. And then we don't even care about quantity of meat, we actually care about the number of animals. So
Yes.
if they actually went from beef to chicken or fish, then it could be far worse. And all of these studies, seem like on the whole, don't actually try to account for different products.
Not as far as I know. There might be some that like make some efforts at this, but I don't think there are any randomized control trials that do this. And I just want to say, like, I'm not blaming the researchers for this. We have been talking to schools about this. It's this incredible process to get data on how many chickens were eaten today. That's like actually a complex problem.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I can imagine it's actually a total. I mean, I'm amazed the universities almost collaborate and want to do this stuff at all.
I agree. I often wonder, like,
amazing.
I'm talking to them, and I kind of want to ask, like, can we like let down our guard right now? And I just want to know, like, why are you talking to me? I'm annoying, and I'm asking you to do this annoying stuff. What is in it for you? It's actually kind of like a complex question, I think, because they probably do have goals, but it might be. Oh gosh, I could talk about this for a long time.
I was saying, wait, have you asked them at all? Like, what do they say?
I did actually ask at one point. I said, like, oh, what motivates you? And we got like some stuff about the sustainability goals, and we got some stuff about, trying to connect towards plant-based students or students who keep to a plant-based diet. A lot of inclusivity concerns have come up. I think inclusivity is underrated always as like a thing that actually motivates dining services.
Yeah, like you said, I'm grateful to them for doing this at all. I think this research is still far better than hypothetical experiments of, people just tick things in a box. So I think this already is far better than that.
I think running a university dining services is hard. You just gotta, like, you're putting out a lot of fires, you're dealing with a lot of student complaints, and then we come in and we ask for this additional thing. And then as we're digging, we realize that the seafood item for the day is called like seafood chef's special. And we know that there are 7 units of that consumed. We don't know anything else. And that's because they're doing things to meet their needs. The,
Yeah.
the, the chef special, the seafood special is probably like, oh man, we got so much seafood. We just have a big pot of seafood. We need to like bring it in. How many animals? Like someone knows how many animals that is, but that's like might be deep in the supply chain. This is actually it's like a
Yeah.
hard
Yeah.
problem. And why would they know? They don't care.
Yeah. 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 This is very interesting. Is there anything else on defaults do you think that people miss, or do you think that's most of the key considerations why? Well, and I guess I think your overall take on this blog post, which we'll definitely share, was you think, oh, like when defaults scale up, that actually they'll affect meat consumption by around 1 to 2 percentage points compared to now, which is obviously much smaller than I've seen as high as 80% in some cases. So I guess that's like your overarching thesis. But yeah, is there anything else that I
Hey,
missed
you know
that
what's funny
drives that?
though, James? I'm actually not so sure those are different because if
Huh.
let's think about this for a second. Let's if 5% of people order plant-based at a university, and the rest get meat, which is like, there's 4% of people are vegetarian, and you
Yeah.
have an 80% increase in that, you've got about 1 to 2 percentage points increase.
Oh no, but I've seen 80% reduction in meat
Oh
meal
yeah.
order.
Oh,
I feel
okay.
like in some of the New York City hospitals, I feel like I heard that was, maybe I'm making this up.
In the hospitals in particular, as I said, I think that's a really good situation for them. My last point about defaults, and I'm really sorry to be such a downer on this, is I'm not totally sure what a default at a restaurant looks like. So like the Chipotle ordering online one is a good example. I can like picture this, but I walk into Pizza Hut, and what's a default at a Pizza Hut? Would it just be like one pizza is said like order our veggie pizza, small
Mm,
letters, meat options available upon request? Pizza Hut's not going to do this. That's not how
yeah.
Pizza Hut works. Like, so if there's
Yeah.
ever,
Yeah.
yeah, you can like make one option bigger. You can put a little sign next to it that says, this is the Chef special, but that's not a
Mm,
default.
mm. Yeah, I feel like there's some things you can do, but probably won't have the impact, well, as big of an impact as we would like. For example, maybe all the cheese is plant-based by default, or I know in coffee shops sometimes the milk is oat
Yeah.
milk by default. But of course, these are important sources of animal suffering, but not the largest sources of animal suffering.
No,
So it's still not getting at the big crux of chicken, for example.
exactly. And if we want to talk about a places where defaults probably are going to work, I think oat milk is really good. And I love that Blue Bottle Coffee is making that its default. And likewise, I like that Starbucks has eliminated the upcharge for plant-based milk that a lot of its or most of its stores. I think everything except the ones that like operate in Targets because they're doing a whole different thing. These things are great. I just want people to not be disappointed when we try to scale these things up to universities or dining halls or anything. And we find that in general, meat eating is a stubborn, deeply seated behavior.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, I guess, in a way, the takeaway for me for this isn't, we shouldn't do this. It's, we should do this, but we shouldn't only count on this, and we should make sure we're pursuing a range of other interventions that focus on this
Totally.
issue to make sure we kind of try to cover all the bases or hit different audiences and different contexts and all that kind of stuff. Is that how you view it as well?
Yeah. And there's really no reason that the default has to be the only thing you do. It can be done in simultaneously with other things. You could make a whole, like, you could start your dining hall with a big thing about why meat is bad for the environment and then have plant-based defaults. So people are already primed to think about it. Why not?
Maybe coming back to this meta-analysis you mentioned earlier on, which none of these default studies bit into, but maybe can you just say more about the meta-analysis more broadly in terms of what did you guys find in terms of
Yeah.
likely effect sizes and what interventions were actually considered in that pool?
To recap, we had these quality-based criteria about sample size, study design, and outcome measurement. This paired the literature down from like 1,000 studies to about 35 papers or 35 papers and like 107 interventions. So right away, that's the headline finding is that like, oh, there's just not that many papers that met this bar. I think there would be more today. Today it would probably be like 50 or 60 if we had done it,
Yeah.
if we had like kept it up. The fun part was figuring out what are the different categories that we could group these things into and how big are the effect sizes per group. So the reason that it's fun to think about the categories is because like you can slice and dice 35 papers a lot of ways. Like we wanted to have a big group that was just like psychology studies. But come on, like, what is psychology? Of course, all things are like if I like make you watch Dominion, that's a psychological intervention. But like, we were talking like, social psychology, which is like norms, trying to get people to think about whether meat is cool or not. And this other stuff, which is like response inhibition training, which is getting people to, if they don't want to eat meat, getting them to like training them to like look away and do something else.
It's very funny. I'm like, people tried this. Like, is anyone going to do this?
Yeah, well, I'm not summarizing it like the best right now, but the response inhibition training, RIT, is a real thing. Actually, it's funny. I just put in a grant that was trying to basically like, well, we haven't gotten the grant yet, so never mind. But let's say theoretically, someone might do something like where you might put on like AR goggles or something and have them, if you like look at meat, it might flash the word like "no" in front of you. Why not?
No way. That's so funny.
You don't like
this.
I'm
I'm like, how, like, why would people do this? Like, how would this scale? Like, in what settings would this happen? I guess I don't understand.
Okay, so there are people out there who say they want to reduce their meat. So you might be like, all right, time to put a shut up. Here are our goggles.
Yeah. I guess fair enough. Yeah, if people say this, and it's like, I guess for me, it sounds kind of funny. It sounds very, it's like you're trying to stop an addiction. It sounds like kind of very intense in that way. But I guess maybe in some ways that is actually the case.
What if you got shocked with a cattle prod every time you ate meat? Why not?
That's what it sounds like. But anyway, okay, so this is one. We got response inhibition training. It's like one.
Okay, so broadly speaking, the categories we looked at, the 35 papers, this is one possible breakdown. There were others are. First, you can try to persuade people. That's good. Talk to them. You can give them environmental reasons, animal welfare reasons, or health reasons to stop eating meat. And then the other category is this automatic stuff, which I'm going to call nudges broadly. That includes defaults, although we didn't look at any in this particular study. Others would be like putting the vegetarian option at eye level at a cafeteria. So you just look at it and it's big and it's like it's just the obvious thing, the salient thing.
Yeah.
The other study in this category, I love this. It was trying to get people to eat less fish sauce at a university in Thailand. So the reason they were interested in this is because of sodium content, but they were effectively reducing the amount of meat that goes in. And to your concerns, James, fish sauce tends to be drawn from like very small fishes. So in fact, a couple grams of fishes could mean like, how many sardines is that? Like a lot, right? These things are tiny. The intervention is they put a hole in the center of the spoon where you would serve yourself fish sauce from as you were bringing it over to your pad thai.
That's so funny.
Great intervention. Great idea. But that's choice architecture. That's like actually kind of like the getting shocked with a cattle prod thing because they're just making it more annoying to get the animal product.
As much as you want. Yeah, I get. In fact, there's been some studies on just making, sounds so silly, making the serving spoon smaller. I guess it's kind of like that. It's just making it harder to, well, it's slightly different. Making it harder to get the amount you want.
Yeah. My colleagues worked in that serving spoon study. We're talking about like it's by Anais Voshki and others at Stanford. It's published in BMJ, sorry. It does seem silly, but on the other hand, if there was some magical thing that was really clever that made people eat less meat, you wouldn't be reading about it in an academic paper. We would already know. Like in some ways, we're just testing the obvious things to see like, okay, well, what will happen? And I love this Thai intervention because it's so creative. I would not have thought of like putting a hole in the spoon. Anyway, sorry. So we've got intervention categories are persuasion, animal welfare, environment, health. We got this nudge stuff. And we've got, as I said earlier, psychology. Almost all the psychology studies, all but one, are trying to make vegetarian options seem like a reasonable, popular, or normal choice. They're norms studies. And the other one is indeed response inhibition training by Camp and Lawrence. Okay, so then you have these categories, and what you do is you take each study's results and you turn it into amount of change in terms of standard deviations. So that's a little bit of an unintuitive concept, but basically you take the spread of like, imagine that you were doing an intervention to get people to score better on the SAT. James, did you take the SAT?
I did a long time ago.
Did you apply to American universities? Where are you from?
Well, I grew up in Dubai. I was considering going to the US, but I did not in the end.
You grew up in Dubai, man. Okay. We'll get back to that. Anyway, SAT is a standardized test that American high schoolers have to take for schmucks, and 100 points per section is a standard deviation. Like that's how they're just scored. And if you did a tutoring intervention that raised their points by 100 points, you would get a standardized mean difference of 1 because the number is equal to the amount of standard deviations that someone changed. This is a little less intuitive in terms of animal welfare stuff because you have to know what every standard deviation is different. But we're talking the actual outcomes are in terms of like percent of a standard deviation. And little drum roll, the answers we found were that every result was tiny, like 0.07, 0.09, 0.21 for the choice architecture stuff, the nudge stuff, but that was just 2 studies. And like, I think the overall answer was 0.07, 0.07. So in SAT terms, this would be like about 7 points. And in animal welfare terms, this isn't like strictly true, but broadly speaking, you can think of this as like 1 or 2 or maybe 3 percentage points reductions.
Wow. So it is very small.
It's small. It's small effects. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of these interventions are doing pretty small things. So this is back to the earlier question about like, do small things have big effects? Like, probably not. To give some context here, like, I'll really talk about 2 studies in particular. So I mentioned the study about about placing the vegetarian option at eye level. This is Anderson and Nylander called Nudge the Lunch. It's a study from 2021. There's 3 options at this university cafeteria. It's in Sweden. You can get meat, fish, or veggies. And they just randomly alter the ordering of those things on a big billboard menu when you walk into the cafeteria.
Mm-hmm.
On days when the vegetarian option was eye level, meat consumption goes down by 5 percentage points. Great. And then you like read the study closely. This is what it means to do meta-analysis. And then you see on those days that fish consumption went up by 4%. So 4 percentage points, sorry. So what's actually happening is that meat gets reduced by about 1%. This translated to an effect size of like 0.1 something. It was like a small effect, but there wasn't that much variation in how much people order meat. So it's actually like a big change because it's like, all right, well, it is the only thing that changes whether they eat meat or not. That's like one example of it looks like a pretty good effect. And if you cared about global warming, you would say like, nice, 5 percentage points. But if you cared about animals and if you care about small animals like you and I do, not so good.
I mean, it's like an extremely important reason like why you should almost read the small print, or why I'm glad people like you are reading the small print of these studies, because you can read the abstract and read the title and you go, wow, 5 percentage points. That's pretty good for a small thing. And then you read a bit further down and you're like, oh, actually, that's not so good. So yeah, I think it was a very important lesson
I don't know, man. Like I said, it's not so good. Am I going to down myself here? Like 1 percentage point, if you do it, like, let's say we got that to all Swedish universities, it's a lot of people. And
yeah, I mean, it totally, if you scale this and everywhere does this and globally goes down by 1 percentage point, it's like, wow, that
awesome.
Could be like several billion animals or something.
Yeah.
It's like, well, that sounds great.
If we're talking about 1% of what's 1% of all shrimp that are farmed in a year? A huge number, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Billions, probably. Anyway, but
couple billion. Yeah.
And so the final thing I'll say about this study also is that you've also pinpointed the actual hard part about this meta-analysis is that unfortunately you cannot skim these papers, and because things like not everyone thinks meat is the same thing. It's just very like when I talked to a person who grew up reasonably religious and Jewish, and she said like, oh well, I don't eat meat, but I eat fish. Like, what? But in the Torah, there's like a definition of what it means to eat meat, and it does not include fish. And so what you think the word meat means is like this very coded thing. So there's no like consensus opinion on this in the literature, which means you actually have to read the papers to see what they're doing.
And the second study, you mentioned?
Oh yeah, sure. It's we can go. Let's talk about as many studies as you want by Andy Jalil and Josh Tassoff and one other person, called a low-cost climate intervention, and then some other words. But it's about at a small school, they have an economics introduction lecture replaced by a lecture about why meat is bad, mostly in terms of environmental reasons and a little bit of health stuff. And the cool thing about their study is that it was at a place where students' dining purchases are actually tracked over the course of their whole time there. You can we can basically see who eats what. And that led to a 5.4% reduction, 4 percentage points reduction in total meat consumed. And what I like about this study is that it had this long-term outcome measure. So that lasted for like 3 years. And also that even though it was mainly about the environmental consequences, there was still a reduction in chicken and in fish.
That's very cool. Yeah, I think I remember watching this because this one almost seemed too good to be true. They watched an hour-long thing about the environmental impacts of animal farming, and then 3 years later, still there's a meaningful impact reduction in their meat consumption. So yeah, this one was surprising for me. I guess was it the same for you?
It's so hard to say. On the one hand, like I'm a human being, and like other humans, I can tell stories. Like I want to tell a story here about how like you get people when they're 18, and it's by the way, it's not a video. It's like the professor giving you this like impassioned lesson about the thing, which is cool. Really cool intervention idea. And I can believe that it would like if it caused like 2 people to go vegan out of all the classes, you would actually observe a 5.4% reduction more or less because that was like a go down from all to nothing. And college students make choices like this. Something gets us to be vegan, those of us who are vegan. But on the other hand, talk about things that are hard to scale. Like this particular professor gave this particular lecture, and I think he did a really good job, probably. I don't know, man. Like if you scale it up to University of Michigan or whatever, and you say like, all right, faculty, you've got to give this lecture. Some of them are going to really sandbag that. So, scaling is going to be.
Sounds like the exact same as some dining halls won't prepare particularly good plant-based options. In this case, maybe some of the lecturers won't give particularly compelling speeches about why action matters.
Yeah. I mean, maybe I'll make my middle name scaling up is hard, one word. It's stuff's like tricky. What can I say?
Yeah. And maybe one minor thing we should probably mention for people who are less in the weeds of statistics, let's say. When you said it went down by 5 percentage points, can you explain what you mean by percentage points rather than percentage?
I'm talking about like out of 100 percentage points. Like if meat was consumed at like half of all meals, it went down to like 45% of all meals. So yeah, the actual percentage points is like the fraction out of 100.
Yeah, because otherwise there's a weird way you can do that. It's like, actually went down by 10%, but only 5 percentage points. So yeah, I think it's useful to clarify how those things are different.
That's why I like to think about things in terms of percentage points, because if you read like medical literature, you get all this like relative risk or odds ratio and stuff, which is all like relative to the baseline incidence. Cancer rate went up by a factor of 3, but it's like, but only 1 out of a million people got that cancer in the first place. So still talking about, like I would talk about what's the actual risk.
Cool. Okay. So we spoke about, defaults.
Yeah.
A few percentage points, pretty good. We should do it. Maybe not as big as some people might hope. The meta-analysis findings, broadly similar, looking at these few different categories of, it was, I guess, psychology, choice architecture, and run me the...
Talking to people, animal welfare, environmentalist, and health persuasion tactics.
Cool. Persuasion. Nice. And maybe diving into some of those categories, or, if people are listening to this and thinking, okay, boy, that's kind of shitting on my parade. And, I thought all these things worked so well. And they're asking, what does work?
What does work?
What would you say in terms of maybe things in those categories or things you haven't covered yet? What things do you think are the most promising to change people's food choices and diets?
If I were talking to young people, I would talk about the environment. I think that's basically the Jalil et al. Study and a couple others that have informed my worldview on this question. And I think that there is a way to frame this argument in a way that gets it actually to not just be cows. If I were talking to older people, this has to be done the right way, but I would talk about health. And the reason it has to be done the right way is, again, this problem that people might sub into smaller animals because they've been told that by like our health authorities, for instance, for a long time. And one supplementary finding from our paper I didn't highlight is that we also looked at studies that tried to reduce just red and processed meat consumption and only reported that instead of all meat. And those are like on average more effective. I think they had an effect size of like a fifth of a standard deviation, which is not huge, but that's good. But I would put a big asterisk next to those studies until we know. Yeah.
So the broad claim is it's actually much easier to reduce red meat consumption compared to other types of meat because maybe people, that's more salient that that's like a bad thing, something compared to chicken or fish.
Yes, perhaps that was true up until a couple of weeks ago when we got the new food pyramid, though. Like, I don't.
That's true.
Yeah. So there's like also this other question of like, do you have temporal validity? Do you think your findings hold into the future? Of course, none of us knows the answer to that question, not even in theory. So those are two things I would be like cautiously optimistic about. I do think that choice architecture works in some settings. And if I had my druthers, I would have a lot of people watch Dominion. There's a study that came out after our paper published by Peter Landry and Lisa Kramer called How the Sausage is Made, in which they get University of Toronto undergrads to watch like either 11 minutes or 16 minutes of a Dominion. And then they ask them what they want to eat. And they also ask them like a week later. And they give them a chance of getting like a 50% chance of having their meal compensated. So it's like a pretty real outcome. And that one reduces pork consumption by a lot and reduces meat consumption overall by quite a bit. So,
wait, how big is quite a lot overall compared to some of the other things we've spoken about?
Gosh, I forget the pork consumption number, but I think it's like 13% percentage points reduction in meat overall a week later. Pretty good. It's like the largest, most credible effect size that I remember in any of the papers I've ever looked at. If you would talk to Peter, he would say that actually undergrads at the Business School of Toronto are not even the ideal sample here. Like we really want to talk to like, I don't know, UC Dublin or whatever they call it, UCD, or like Hampshire College in America, like the liberal leaning amenable students.
Yeah, or like the environmental or biology departments, who I can imagine are slightly more open-minded towards animal issues.
And the challenge is that when you turn Dominion on, if you're anything like me, you're going to be very inclined to turn it off very quickly if you have the choice. A study is a good way of getting people to like, as Stanley Milgram taught the world, really easy to get people to do stuff in a study. They like want to please the experimenter. So I'm talking about this famous like shocking experiment from the 70s. So I think that's a good avenue forward. I don't know how we would turn that into like a big campaign though.
Yeah, it's hard to sit people down and make them watch a documentary. But I guess in a way, this is, some thing that I guess we've been doing for a while is there are a bunch of college groups in the US and other countries that do host things like film screenings, and it seems like this is actually a good thing, and they should keep doing this, and it can be like surprisingly powerful.
On average, I'm not so keen on documentaries. The Dominion study really stands out in terms of its effect sizes. My colleague and principal investigator Maya Mather did a separate study on, I think, Game Changers or not Game Changers. What the hell? One of them. Found pretty small effects that didn't really last.
Yeah, I've heard this, that I think Liz Pollard on his Substack some time ago had a good piece on documentaries, and I think his conclusion is there's a wide range of effectiveness, and yes, there's lots of ones that don't work, but there's a small number. I think Dominion seems to be in this list that are just like highly persuasive, and we should focus on getting these out into the world and maybe playing these at screenings rather than some of the random ones.
I mean, I certainly agree with that. And when you take this out of its particular context and think about it for a minute, some movies are better than others. Everybody knows this.
It makes total sense. It's not exactly rocket science.
Yeah.
That's cool. Okay, so documentaries is
one documentary.
Yeah, so maybe one. Definitely Dominion, maybe a couple others. I can imagine some Earthlings, which is quite Dominion-esque. Maybe that's up there. Maybe it's old and dated now.
Earthlings I found very challenging. I got to the point where they were gassing the dogs, and I could not continue.
God. Yeah, that's intense.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have high quality documentaries, let's say, surprisingly persuasive. What else?
I know you're going to want me to talk about what else works. I knew this was going to happen. And I'm going to say, like, I don't know. And the reason that I'm a researcher is that I love saying I don't know, even though I don't like when people
It's
look at
true.
me so sad about when I say it. You don't look sad right now, but like people don't
Well,
like
no,
this.
I laugh because it's like there's so many funny researcher tropes. It's like more research is needed. I don't know, or
Yeah.
it's context dependent. It's like, God damn it, we just want clear answers.
Oh,
Seth, how
I think I've
complicated
covered
is
all three of those. Thank you. Are there any like more research is needed? I was gonna say that, but I didn't want it's just too annoying, so I didn't say it. But like for sure, I think that. I mean, I can tell you what I'm thinking about now in terms of what I want to test. I want to know, can we get people to think about the small body problem as having moral implications?
Yeah, and by that you mean people going from large animals like cows to chickens and
Yep.
fish, where they actually kill more animals overall.
Yep, that's exactly the problem, or the small animal replacement problem, as it's sometimes been called. As far as I know, there's been no studies where we ask people like, "Hey, did you know a cow is a lot bigger than a chicken? Do you know how much bigger?" I think first of all, I want to ask people this. I want to know like, how big do you think a cow is? No, you idiot! It's 1,000 pounds, whatever. Like, I think that most people are very disconnected from modern agriculture and also have no idea like what's happened. Like, chickens now grow to their slaughter weight in like 40 days. That's an update to people. The fact that they can't barely stand up is an update. I want to know if there's some way to get people to think like, okay, here are the size differences. Here's how many more animals you want to eat. You'd have to kill to get a pound of meat if it comes from a small animal.
Mm.
Do you think this matters? And I've been thinking about this study for like a year, and I haven't actually gotten anywhere with it because I can't figure out how to ask this last part. Do you think it matters? Like, if you
Mm.
ask people this in a survey, they're going to be like, no, end of discussion. Like, that's not meaningful.
That's funny. I thought you were going to say you can't ask that because the leading question, and people be like, "Yes, he
Well,
clearly
that
wants me to say
too. I don't know
yes."
what they're going to say. The point is that I don't think the answer is meaningful. I think I have to
Mm.
actually really get to people's hearts here.
Yeah, I mean, could you not almost tie that with one of this, like you get a 50% chance of getting the meal you want, and one of the options is a beef
Chicken or
burger, one's chicken.
we could do that. It's called it like an incentive compatible outcome measure. I suspect that you're going to get no effect on people's behavior just by telling them this thing. Well, a friend of mine who I will always be grateful for actually being honest with me about this said, I think that both of those animals are in the food chain. So why would I care whether two of them need to die or one or whatever?
I mean, it would be interesting to test. I agree. I don't think I've seen anything like this, and this is a perennial problem for animal advocates. So, I mean, personally, I'd be very interested to see something like
Yeah.
this. But yes, I'll leave the details of making it work. Thank
Thanks.
you.
We're thinking about that now. That's kind of my like when I need to like stop procrastinating and just do a study. I mean, it's funny about research. Like, there's so many ways I can writing a Substack where I talk about research or talking to you. This is a lot of fun. This is like the part where we get to say like, oh, what's true, what's false. But like the actual thing where you stare at a piece of paper and come up with a research idea, very hard. I don't really know if I'm good at it. I think like, oh, I'm okay at it. I shouldn't undersell. But like this is the hard part, especially not just like I have an idea. It's like, okay, you have a research topic, the small body problem. How do you translate that into a question? What's your question?
Yeah.
The questions are always hard.
Other questions? So another thing you did a study on
Yes.
additional veggie options. You want to say about that?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a study I worked on with Jessica Hope, Jacob Peacock, and Maya Mather. It's an online survey environment. The paper is called, what is it called? Something about giving fresh veggies the boot or something, or it's got a long title. And we might change it as we submit it to a journal. But it's about, we ask people to think that they're like in a consumer type environment where they are selecting pens, t-shirts, and tacos. We randomize the order between those three things. And the actual treatment is when you're filling out your taco, how many plant-based options do you get? So it looks exactly like the Chipotle menu. And in one option, you get the number of plant-based options that are actually at Chipotle, which is chips and veggies and guacamole and what's it called? Sofritas. Sofritas is like a carnitas analog made out of soy something.
Probably. Yeah.
The other treatment is we take away the sofritas, and then the third treatment is we add to sofritas and chips and guac, or plants, veggies and guac, something called like chickenitas, which is meant to be a chicken-based analog but a fake thing. But we like label it as vegetarian, but we don't talk about it in other contexts. And we just see what people choose. Again, this is hypothetical. They're just like going through the survey. And we did this in a pretty well-powered sample of like a few thousand people. And we found changes of, this will shock you, 1 to 2 percentage points per additional arm. It's like 1.1 percentage points for like no options to one option is like one or 1.5 percentage points of more veggie options. And then adding the second option again, like 2.4 percentage points change. More people order veggie options.
I'm surprised that the no to one option was actually so small. Wait, and surely it can't be.
Sorry, no plant-based. That's my bad. The no option had veggies and guac.
Got it. Okay.
So it's like this like a meat analog thing is actually what we're testing.
Got it. Okay. So it seems like, well, yeah, I guess we don't know actually what the impact is from going from 0 to 1 in terms of overall meat sales, but you can probably imagine having no plant-based options is not great for various reasons. Going to one, it's one is going to one is good, but going to 2 and 3 is pretty minor in terms of how much it actually impacts things.
Yeah. Or maybe it's not if we imagine that this study was actually taking place at Chipotle in person, and maybe the chickenitas is incredibly delicious and it was cheaper and something like that. You can keep adding this. This is a very simple test of just introduce 1 or 2 more novel protein options and see if people choose them. There is indeed like the effects are pretty weird. Like in the group with 3 plant-based options, more people order steak than in any other group. Why? I don't know. There's always just random noise in studies. Or maybe there's some reason that I can't think of. But we do notice that as you introduce more and more plant-based meat options, the percentage of people who choose veggies and guac goes down. So like the total number of people who choose plant-based options goes up less than the change in each new option. So like, the chickenitas might get like 3% of people to choose it, but
yeah,
some of those otherwise would have chosen veggies.
Yeah. So you're kind of, the overall share goes up a little bit, but it's kind of being divided amongst all the available options. So
Yep.
yeah, I think that kind of makes sense.
These studies, if we take this at face value, which you might not do, you might say like, oh, hypothetical studies, whatever. I want to see this like in Chipotle. If you do take it at face value, you'd say this is good because it gives vegetarians more options. Good, right? On the other hand, what we were looking for in this study was an effect size big enough that we could literally take it to Chipotle and say, hey, there's unmet demand for this chickenitas thing. Like, can you invent this and sell it? Could have worked.
I mean, there is some unmet demand, but I guess it's probably not going to meet their bar of introducing this. And
I was just saying, we thought that a reasonable starting point for like there's unmet demand would be like 5 percentage points change.
Yeah, because I guess for them, if they're cannibalizing their veggies and guac, I don't know how good is that for them, because then maybe they don't have good economies of scale in producing that product, and it's like,
yeah,
I don't know.
Or just every new thing at a restaurant like Chipotle is logistical overhead.
Yeah.
If Chipotle fully automated, if it became a robot restaurant, it's funny because the founder of Chipotle at one point wanted to do this. There's like I think it was Chipotle. He like had a little side venture.
Yeah, well, I think Sweet Green is trying to do this. Is my understanding as well.
Any of these like fast casual places with a lot of venture capital money, they're definitely trying. They're definitely someone's thinking, Then you can add a lot of options. So maybe at that point, actually, there's some idea that kind of automation will like lower the bar. But I'm not like cheering for us to get rid of human labor here.
Yeah. That's for another podcast.
Yeah. I'm not saying work is good, but this was complicated.
Couple last questions. One, so I guess one that you mentioned that you were potentially excited about that kind of hasn't been tested much, which is this: tell people directly about, their impact on food choices on different sizes of animals and in number of individuals. That's one. Is there anything else that's in this category of interesting but not yet tested that you're kind of keen to explore?
Yeah, I feel like it's funny. Academia sometimes has a real like defensive posture where you don't share what you're working on because you don't want someone else to scoop you. But I have never had that happen to me. I guess my field is too obscure, so I'm just going to go ahead with what I'm working on. We're working on a study where we make the default steadily more onerous. So like, how much effort do you need to put in to opt out? And if we can, and we're going to measure meat because of meat consumption, and also backlash. Like the more onerous it gets, theoretically, the more people are going to say like, you can ask them, I agree with this approach, or like I felt like this study was trying to force me to do something I didn't want to do. You can ask like directly, what did you think? So I'm interested. I'm curious about that. I think there might be like some sweet spot where defaults actually are no longer automatic, but are combined with arguments, for instance, about the environment and inclusivity. That I think that might work pretty well.
Interesting. Yeah, because I think this all came up in the conversation with Katie. It's trying to move from just changing the immediate food choice they make to somewhat having some education or maybe some long-term behavior change. Yeah, via this kind of like information stimulus. Yeah, I think it'd be very cool to see to what extent that helps or it annoys people. Who knows?
I don't know. I think that there's a lot of opportunity for just testing this stuff, and a lot of but back to your first question about culture versus technology, like, there's always going to be vegan subplots on TV, for instance. I think there was
Yeah.
one and just like that, the sequel to Sex and the City, where it was like, a hunky vegan gardener or something. I heard this third hand, and I didn't watch it. I'm sorry. But like, if I could wave a magic wand, I would put this kind of stuff into, oh my God, I don't even know what people watch anymore. Like, is Modern Family still on? Whatever is the modern equivalent of Modern Family, Bob's Burgers or something. No, Bob's Burgers actually did do a vegan episode. Anyway, and I would just try to make it like a really good plot line, and
Yeah.
not in which the vegan is annoying, but in which the vegan is just like a normal person doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think some of this is happening in the climate world, both in terms of trying to how to subtly nudge people towards low carbon behaviors in ways that they're not the freak ordering lettuce or
Yeah.
I'm not flying and therefore I'm not coming on this holiday. You guys are all evil. Is how do you kind of normalize and kind of celebrate these things a bit more? So I think it's
Yeah.
interesting.
I like the idea of normalization. I
Yeah.
mean, but on the other hand, we've got a lot of reason to think that that won't work, because like we can think of lots of vegan celebrities who, by dint of their veganism, are perceived as weird.
Mm.
Moby.
Yeah. Nobody's pretty hardcore as far as they come.
Yeah. But
I
I
don't
guess,
think Billie Eilish is seen as weird. I think it is kind of maybe
yeah,
how hard they lean into it. And
that's true.
Billie Eilish is fairly outspoken, I would say, as well.
Oh, good for her. I actually didn't know that.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you guys are working on at the Humane and Sustainable Food Lab that's
There's lots of
worth mentioning?
projects in the mix. Those are the ones that I'm involved in. I'm also doing a default thing, and I'm thinking about the last one I'm excited about, and this one's very nascent, is back to our earlier question about culture change at universities. So you go in and you talk to dining services and you ask, why are you talking to me? Like, what do you think? Like, what is in it for you? I actually, like, if you reframe that question as like, tell me about your needs and tell me about how plant-based diets are consistent with them, it stops being an annoying question and starts being like, how can we help each other? So I've been thinking lately about, I am hoping to run a study where I talk to young people who are working on this stuff at the university level. Like,
That's cool. So people who are working in the catering and dining services sections.
well, first I want to talk to advocates who have tried to get more plant-based options, and then I want
Got
to
it.
talk to their counterparts at dining services to get a sense of like, how do we like cross these? How do we create cultural connections between us? And what worked, what didn't work, what kind of requests are amenable? And there's like this garbage can model of organizations where organizations are big and complex, and some people have some problem and other people have other solution, and if they like link, then things happen.
Yeah.
And so like I guess I
Yeah.
want to know. I want to study that up close.
That's cool. That's exciting. So the three projects are, there's this, testing people's reactions to small animal replacements and seeing if that's at all sympathy inducing.
Yeah.
One is the last one you just said, which is dining services and student advocates. And
Yep.
then
And
remind me
the
of the
third
one
one
in the
is
middle.
altering the onerousness of default.
Oh, yes, that's it. That's a cool one. Yeah. It's very exciting. And I'm sure, I guess, we'll see these out
Yeah, I
on your
hope so.
blog.
Geez. I mean, I get in my own way sometimes when I write these papers. That's the truth. It's like really hard to think about like how to operationalize these things. Like, what's our dependent variable? What's our outcome? What are we looking at? Like, you can
Mm,
think about that question forever, but at some point you got to
yeah,
just write the paper.
nice. Well, there's many advocates working on this stuff, so I think it's very useful to have people like yourselves and others at your lab doing this kind of deep and important research. So
Thank you.
for what you
It's
do.
kind of
It's
you.
exciting. And then we always finish off with a few of the same closing questions. So, Seth, what's one bit of news you're excited about or grateful to hear recently?
I am excited that Norway has announced a policy to phase out the most popular breeds of fast-growing chicken, which are called the Ross 308 and the Cobb 500, because fun fact, a chicken is in fact an R&D project worth hundreds of millions of dollars. What we're talking about here is that the kind of chickens that take like 40 days to grow to maximum weight, and then many of them have serious health issues as a result of that. They topple over, they can't support their own weight. They're too top heavy because people love the breasts in particular. And I want to talk here for a second about chicken breeds because it's a very interesting question. I looked into this a little bit recently. When we talk about better chicken commitment and the European chicken commitment, which are these policies intended to get people off these fast-growing breeds, it's really interesting to me that it might not mean what people think it means. Like the alternative called the red bro. I don't know why it's called that. I think it takes I think she takes 48 days to grow to maximum weight. That, I'm not an animal scientist. I actually don't know if that's a meaning, how much suffering I should be thinking about this in terms of production. I think when people think heritage breeds, they're thinking of the kinds that used to take many months. They're grandparents' chickens. It's not that. It's something a little different. And I think that's good, but I'm not an expert on this question.
Yes, I think the win is huge. I think that the largest chicken producers in Norway have committed to phasing this out, over a relatively quick time period, which would be, I think, the country that is by far leading this charge, which is so consequential because I think of the 80 billion vertebrate land animals we kill, I think something like 70 billion is chickens,
Yeah.
the vast majority.
Absolutely. What we really want from this is a demonstration that, in fact, you will raise chicken prices by less than the doomsayers say. So they're going to be like, oh, it's going to make it unaffordable. And it's like, okay, it was a couple cents a kilogram. Next argument.
Yeah, we'll see. But maybe answer your question of how good are the welfare benefits. I would always refer people to the Welfare Footprint Institute. We have all the best research on this. And, my read on the research on the better chicken commitment is roughly reduces their suffering by about 50% relative. So the fast growing breed has the slow growing breed has 50% less suffering compared to the fast growing breed. Even though they do live a bit longer, but just the quality of their life is so much better in terms of they can actually move around and they don't have breathing problems and they don't overheat and all this, the litter dries out, loads of stuff. So I'd recommend people.
Cool. And so when you talk about slow growing breeds, you are talking about the red bro and these next nearest alternatives.
Yeah. The most basically, I think they did a study based on the next most commercial, feasible alternative.
Is there a welfare level at which you would eat chicken, James?
Well, boy, that's a tough question. Personally, I don't think so. At least I see no reason for me to do so. I guess I'm a pretty precautionary principle kind of person, and I felt that'd always be a question in my mind is, did this have suffering at some point? And I think some people have spoken about being a welfare-tarian or a pasture-tarian. I don't know exactly what the words are. If you can be sure that animals have positive lives. For me, it's a high bar.
It's a high bar, yeah. I think I would eat eggs. I were pretty happy with how the chickens were raised. I don't think I would eat chicken itself.
Yeah. I think, there's defensible backyard hen claims to be made if you rescue them, etc., etc. Okay, well, what are some media recommendations you might have for listeners? So you mentioned a bunch of papers. We'll link those. Are there things, besides your blog, Regression to the Meat, which actually, I didn't say this already, but I love the name. I think it's one of the best blog names of all time. We'll link that. Anything else you'd recommend for people?
First of all, I like that you phrased this question. What are your meat recommendations? Of course, I'm going to say carnitas and steak and whatnot.
Media. Did I say meat?
You said that?
Media.
I heard meat. I'm so proud.
That's my bad.
That's on me. I really like Warren Belasco's book, Food, The Key Concepts. It's in the field of food studies. I think a lot of folks in our movement have read a lot of stuff about activism. I want people to read about what does food mean to people? And when I talk about why I'm not so keen on defaults, a part of it is because I think that food means a lot to people. And it's not a crazy claim. I think everybody knows that. Once someone I know very well said that meat was how he knew his mom loved him. And it's
wow.
I'm not going to just default this person into being vegan. They're going to notice this stuff. Anyway, so food is a really good overview of like what is food like mean for society and for people. I would say everything written by two authors in particular at Vox, Marina Bolotnikova and Kenny Torreya. And they write a lot about animal welfare stuff in a way I think they get it.
Yeah, I agree. I think some of their coverage is some of the best stuff for people who will also enjoy this podcast. So we'll link this. And how can people get more involved in your work or follow you more generally?
I have no social media presence to speak of besides my Substack. So that's regressiontothemeat.substack.com. And our seminar, the lab I work at, the Humane and Sustainable Food Lab at Stanford, we have a seminar series that is public and we welcome more participants. And I think James will put a link to that.
That's right. It's exciting. Yeah, I think I may have been to one of them. I do recommend it. I think there's no better way to get, like, I don't know, reading a research paper or something or reading a summary, but just being able to hear someone who did the research talk about it in a bit more depth and you can ask them questions, for me feels a lot more fruitful.
Totally.
Than just reading.
And by the way, the recap group run by Brian Research and Analytics is another group in this group that you can just show up. Like a lot of this stuff is happening. And my final comment on that is that on a spectrum of like how much we drink the haterade, I'm an extremist. Like other people at the lab will you'll like hear what they say and you'll feel good.
This is good to know. This is, maybe we should put this earlier on in the episode so people can have it.
This is not normal. My behavior is abnormal.
I mean, I think it's good to balance optimism and some pessimism. And I feel like we've had lots of optimistic people on the podcast. So it's nice to have some.
Yeah.
Some people call it realism. Some people call it pessimism.
I don't know if I'm pessimistic. I think I really do.
Skeptical, critical, whatever.
Skeptical, I would go with. I really do believe that we can convince the world to stop doing factory farming, but I think we can't get there without doing the hard work of talking to people about what food means to them.
Yeah, that's a great place to end it. Well, thanks so much, Seth. It's been great to have you.
Thank you, man.